We are coming closer towards the end of this module. There are just some things I would like to show you to make sure you really get the big picture of GitHub and all its core features that you might want to use in your daily work, in your projects. In this lecture, I want to dive into README files. To understand this, I'm back in my personal account here, and I'll go to a repository, this GitHub Basics repository we're using throughout this entire module actually. If you look at this page, you'll see a hint which we, didn't comment so far on purpose. This hint down here help people interested in this repository understand your project by adding a README. That's exactly what we'll cover and create now. We will add a README file to our repository, and the recommendation is to do this also in your personal projects or any projects you might be working on. What and why? What is the background of these README files now? Well, generally README files are optional. The README file should, communicate important information about the project, so about the repository, what is done in here, what type of code it is, and what the project in this repo is all about. And it can also help to manage contributions in this project. So if you have an open source project, for example, where people can contribute to, you can immediately in this README file set the core rules for people who might want to contribute to your project. Besides that, it can also contain information like, as I said, what the project is generally about, why it might be a great and helpful and useful project, and how people might get started. So how they can clone the code, do they have to run any kind of commands, for example npm install, which we'll use in the next module, for example. So all to make sure that people can use and understand the code in your repository as quick as possible. Where should we put this README file? Well, here we'll add it automatically in the root folder, and this is also something which doesn't hurt. So if you put it into the root folder of your project, GitHub will automatically recognize this README file and show it to visitors, which is actually a good thing, because if you visit that project, that repository, then the README is the first thing you should read about. With that, enough of the words. Let's now create this README file by clicking onto Add a README. In there, we see that the file will indeed be created in the root folder in the GitHub Basics repository and there in the master branch where we currently are in. So this is fine for us. And now we can edit this new file. If you closely inspect it, this area right here, then you see this MD file ending. MD stands for Markdown, and in case you never heard of that, it's a lightweight markup language to, create formatted text in a very easy and convenient way. If you never heard of that, make sure to dive into some dedicated resources, which dive deeper there. Generally, to make things easier to understand here though, and even if you never saw Markdown code before, I'll take some, README text from a page of our Academind GitHub account and paste it there. Then we can have a quick look at it. And then we have a, nicely formatted README file, also in the correct Markdown language without any kind of dummy text. Therefore, let's quickly go to the Academind GitHub repository for our React the Complete Guide course. This is it. So in case you're interested into learning React, a JavaScript library, you can of course do that, but again, not the topic of this course. And on this course page, you see that Max actually updated the README file. And if we scroll down now, you can immediately see that the README file content is displayed down there. This is the README file. And as you can see, it is displayed on the actual starting page of the repository. And this is great because anybody who, visits this page can immediately check what this code is all about. In this case, these are code attachments to our React course, and we explain how students can use these attachments. What I did now, as I have access to this repository, is I copied that code here, so this markdown code behind that text you can see, and now we can go back to new file, and I'll just delete this GitHub Basics text and paste this markdown code. As you can see, it's a lot of text actually, and this is what Markdown looks like. This, for example, is the core headline, so it's this big headline here. Here we have a smaller headline. You can see this is here with the 2 hashes in front. There you can see an image, so how we can integrate this in here. And down there, if we scroll down a bit, for example, right here, this is how we, whoops, that was too far. Give me a second. This right here is how we add links in Markdown. As I said, this is not a Markdown course, so make sure to dive into dedicated resources in case you want to find out more about this in here. Generally, this is what a typical README file could look like, so it guides people through the project and how they can use the code. With that, we can commit this new file, and that's very important. We have to create a commit to save this README file here in our repository, because in the end, well, everything saved in our repository must be part of the, well, latest commit in this case. Therefore, well, we can say added README file as commit message. We don't need any extended description here. And we commit this directly into the master branch. That's okay for us. So let's commit this new file now. Here we are. And now you see we have this README Markdown file, which can also be found here in the repository. And if we scroll down, by the way, the image here is not loading correctly because we didn't add the image to our folder, but that's nothing we should have to worry about at this stage. But generally, this is now our README file. So whenever anybody visits this repository page right here, he or she can immediately see that we have detailed instructions about this repository and what this repository is all about in here. So this is the README file to provide more information about the repository. Besides the README file itself, we also have our GitHub profile page, of course. Now we can access our profile by clicking onto the, well, profile image in the right top part here, and there check our profile. So if you go to github.com and then your GitHub name, then this is what visitors see. This doesn't look too fancy at the moment, so in the next lecture we'll see how we can freshen things up a bit here, because that's actually the page anybody, any potential job recruiter, for example, might visit. Therefore, this shouldn't look like this. So let's see how we can improve this a little bit. This is a Git and GitHub course and not a complete portfolio landing page design course. Therefore, I'll stick to the basics though, but I want to show you one little trick maybe, which helps you to make your, well, GitHub page more attractive in an easy step actually. One important note though, as you can see, you can pin different repositories up here. If you want to do this, you of course need repositories and projects to present. If you don't have any projects to present at the moment, then you should of course first work on these projects, because then you can present these here on your GitHub page. We of course have some basic things to dive into, but these are self-explanatory in my opinion. Here you can, for example, change your avatar, your image basically, that you might want people to see here. You can add some biography down there, and you can also add the URL to your website. Here we could, for example, say in our case, this would be academind.com. There we could add our Twitter account and then the company name and so on. So you could update your profile with these basic things. This would of course be a first nice step. So this update was successful. As you see, not a lot changed. Now we have our website displayed right here. You can also edit your profile by clicking onto this edit profile button, by the way. But as I said, these are all things you can explore on your own. It's pretty straightforward actually. There is just one thing I wanted to show you, and that's again related to the README topic we just explored in the last lecture. Because if we create a new repository now by clicking onto this plus symbol and there go to new repository, then we have the owner of the repository, so your GitHub name. And if you then type this name also as the repository name, then you found a secret. Of course, this is not a big secret, but it's just some nice little gimmick here in GitHub that I wanted to show you. So as this little, well, information box here shows you already, you can use this repository to add a README file to your GitHub profile. And as we saw it for the repository in the last lecture, this README file will then be displayed for anybody who is visiting your profile here. That's kind of a nice thing, I'd say, at least to get started with creating your GitHub profile. Therefore, we'll keep this public, of course, and important, we should add the README file, because without the README file, well, there is nothing to display. So let's now create this repository. So this is it. Now we have this README file inside our repository as the first commit, and we see hi there with that nice waving hand. If we now check out our profile though, then you see this README file is also displayed right here. So that's what I meant. With this, you can easily create a nice looking starting page if you want to. You can, of course, also edit it by clicking onto this pen symbol. And in here, you can see that GitHub already prepared some additional text for you. You can comment in this text if you want to, right here and right there at the bottom, these arrows. This is the out commented text. Now we could keep this hi there. We could say, I Manuel and I love to teach, for example. Then we could actually delete this text here. I don't think this looks too cool. Also, this is nothing we need. And then you could say, I'm currently working on a very special course, the course you're attending at the moment. I'm currently learning, well, I won't tell you because this will tell you what our next course is, so we will keep this secret for the moment. And then you can add people you're looking to collaborate for and so on. So you can simply use this space to create your own page. You can also have a nice preview here to see what that looks like. And if you say, okay, I'm happy with that, you can then commit this change, like updated landing page README, for example, and then commit this change right here. And with that, if we again check out our profile, you see that now we have this edited text in here. I'm aware that this is not completely fancy, but I think this whole README logic perfectly ties into this profile logic here. And with this, we are almost done with this, well, module. There is just one last thing I would like to show you, which you will also see if you start working with GitHub. So let's have a look at GitHub stars to conclude this module finally.